When we look at the modern skepticism of miracles, what is that rooted in? How do we, why do we take such a different view of miracles than maybe they did in the ancient world?
It might be, kind of some of the scientific revelation we've had over the last 350 years, and science didn't start out this way. Newton in his Principia and stuff like that talks about just finding out how God runs the world, so to speak, and things of this sort. But we've gotten to the point where we have this rigid dogma that we only can look for natural explanations for anything, and therefore there must only be natural explanations. You kind of get in this circular reasoning of how you then disavow all miracles.
Yeah, so we have a kind of a priori dislike of anything supernatural. But then there's also this view of kind of the ancients were morons, right? Did the ancients not know that these things were miraculous? Because that's kind of the what you see a lot of people, modern people saying, well, the people were so ignorant back then, they didn't know what a miracle was, and so they didn't, I mean...
Yeah, obviously they're still calling them miracles.
Right.
Lazarus was brought back from the dead. It's not like, oh, look at that happened today.
Yeah, obviously they understand that these things are miraculous and outside of the normal course of nature because they stand in awe of them, much like we would if we were to witness them today. It's not like they just go, oh, well, I guess I don't know any better. To them, they're clearly miraculous. They're clearly something outside of the natural world and the natural order. But they didn't have the same assumption that nothing existed outside of the natural order. Why is that maybe not the best assumption that we could make?
Other than that it doesn't accord with what we believe reality to be. Obviously, I say obviously, but there's not, there are scientists who will definitely disagree with me, but nature can't create itself. It's at the very least, even if you ascribe to, say the Big Bang Theory, which is still well accorded in scientific circles, you have everything coming out of nothing. And so if you're relegated to looking for a natural explanation, you have a problem because nature didn't exist to provide an explanation at that point. Nature came into existence at that point. And so that might be one problem in trying to have a purely natural view of everything.
Yeah, some would say that nobody, you can take the most modern, most atheistic, most materialistic scientists in the world, and some would say that those people don't live up to what they believe, that there's no way to actually live with that kind of worldview other than to be a hypocrite. Why do people say that?
I mean, it's one of those things. Like if you take you take it to its logical conclusion and that purely naturalistic view, and if I like to use the analogy, if you put a bullet through my head, all you've done is move a few atoms around, no problem, no big deal. And because there's no meaning and purpose accorded to the world by this worldview, and the problem is that none of us can live without meaning and purpose. It is absolutely impossible. The nihilism that results, has led many to, many of those who ascribe to it to suicide.
Yeah, and so once again, C.S. Lewis would say that the belief in miracles, you have to have a couple of different assumptions, and the first one is that there is a normal order to the natural world, and then the second thing is that there's something beyond the natural world. Now, most modern people would believe in the first assumption that there's a normal order to the natural world, but would disbelieve in the second. And yet, C.S. Lewis's argument is that you can't really live that way, and nihilism is one of them. That you find no meaning in the world, but secondly, that in order to even think or act in the world, you have to actually assume there's something beyond the world. What does he mean by that?
I don't know. You tell me. What does he mean by that?
Well, in order to think and to trust your thoughts, can you do that if you only believe in the natural world?
I gotcha. So, in a sense, if the natural world is all that exists, then my mind was created by this natural world, and why am I to think that this natural world created my mind to have an accurate depiction of reality in any way, shape, or form. You know, and I guess you can devolve into anti-realism and ultimate skepticism. And
Right, right. So the idea would be that if we see somebody who's crazy, their mind is not giving them an accurate picture of reality, and we could say, well, they have a chemical imbalance. It's because of chemicals that they don't see the world accurately. But yet we would say that somebody who's sane, it's because of those same chemicals that he's sane. Maybe different proportions, but how can the proportion of chemicals on one hand yield thoughts that are trustworthy, and the same chemicals in slightly different proportions yield ones that aren't? It doesn't make a lot of sense from the standpoint of how can a completely mechanical thing that exists in the world exists above the world to the extent necessary to give us an accurate picture of the world. But then he says to even act in the world, you have to have a belief in something beyond the world. What do you mean by that? We talk about motivation being important. What's behind motivation? And it's interesting that the word emotion comes from the idea of
motives.
Of motives. You know, so if I go over to your house and you know, rearrange all your furniture and put my feet up on the coffee table and eat stuff out of your fridge and tell your kids they're weirdos, would that make you upset at all?
No, that's my job. Yes, that would make me upset. That is my job. Obviously, I don't know if we're getting to some idea of you know, this. Certain things are mine in some way, shape, or form. But if, you know, in a natural world, there's just atoms.
Mm-hmm.
Why are any belonging to anything?
Right.
And why is there ownership of anything? And, you know, so in a sense, I guess in acting, I wasn't quite sure how that word was being used and stuff like that. But I guess we all kind of have a sense that there are things that exist beyond the physical, including the fact that I exist and that I can own things. And,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there would be any reason to act, to do anything. If, you know, if I'm just a collection of atoms and after I die, I'll just be a collection of atoms, and there's really no difference between the collections of atoms, and then eventually that collection of atoms will disperse, but it'll still be a collection of atoms, then there doesn't seem to be a reason even to keep myself alive, other than the fact that maybe I have some kind of intrinsic value. But then you extend that to everybody else and everything else in the world. What makes your kid different than somebody else's kid? You know, it's is the fact that there's genetic differences sufficient reason for you to work and sacrifice for one set of kids but not another? And before genes were discovered, you know, the fact that maybe one kid looks more like you than another. You know what I'm saying? Like, and yet the world has existed and gone on, and we have these values. How does the modern person get around this issue, this problem, if they don't believe in something beyond the natural world?
Great question. You know, and you know, there's a whole realm of like evolutionary psychology that tries to describe these things. You know, not necessarily always providing a vehicle for how they work or anything like that. But then you also get, you know, some of the atheists will confront this problem head on. And yet at the end of the day, they realize they can't live without meaning, and so they talk about being able to create your own meaning, and which is complete illusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, that it's just not going to carry any weight. If I, you know, decide to, you know, pretend that I'm Steve Williamson, and you know, but I know that I'm pretending the whole time, it's going to be hard for me to actually really believe this, you know, when it comes down to it.
Yeah. You don't want to be me anyway.